Oh, good evening, everybody. We'll get the OCM started at 6 p.m. So declare the Ordinary Council meeting open at that time. The Town of Bassendean acknowledges the past and present traditional owners of the land upon which we gather to conduct this meeting, and we pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. Unfortunately, tonight, Mayor Hamilton will not be with us, given that she's unwell. I mean, as everybody would attest to, it's this time of season can be fraught with illness, so we hope a speedy recovery to our Mayor.
Just a point of order, she is online and she is a voting member tonight, so can't be here to preside, but is an active member.
Yes, so just to clarify that, that's the explanation as to why she's not sitting in this chair, and you have to hear from me instead. But Mayor Hamilton will be actively participating in the meeting, is just not here in person, so as to not make anybody else unwell. So we thank her for that. In terms of attendances, apologies and applications for leave of absence. Well, firstly, we'd like to welcome Director of Infrastructure and Sustainability, Mr. Shane Asmus. I hope I've correctly pronounced that.
You certainly have, thank you, and I'm happy to be here and looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Great. Absolutely, thank you. Shane had commenced with the town as of this Monday, so looking forward to it. Now, in terms of apologies, Director of Corporate Services, Paul White, is an apology for this evening. That moves on to leaves of absence, and I will indicate, because we have received an indication from Councillor Ames, that he's requested a leave of absence from the 16th of June through to the 22nd of June. Councillor Ames, are you able to confirm that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that is correct. Thank you for support. If I can scoot out here, thank you.
Absolutely. So we will deal with that request, given that there are no further requests. So do I have a mover to support Council? Thank you, Councillor Wilding, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Carter. Unless there's anybody who's opposed to that online, no, I take that as carried. Thank you, Councillor Ames. Moving on to declarations of interest. So there were declarations of interest which were noted at the briefing session. So just to reiterate those, so there was one by Doug Pearson declared an impartiality interest in respect of item 12.3. So that is in respect of the Metropolitan Regional Road Group. And I also have a declaration of an impartiality interest from Councillor Ames in relation to item 12.5, which is the advocacy priorities for financial year 24-25.
15.2 now.
It's just been brought to my attention that that same impartiality would apply to items 15.2. Just to clarify for those present, an impartiality interest doesn't preclude somebody from being involved in that item. It's just full disclosure so that people know how those who are declaring the impartiality interest are related to the items in question. So we would expect full participation from those who have declared an interest. In terms of presentations or deputations, we haven't received any deputations for this evening, so we won't be receiving any of those. Statements by members of the public. So the town has received some statements by members of the public who don't intend to be present this evening to deliver those statements. So one of those statements is by Ms. Katharina Wolfe, and that was in relation to items 12.5 and 12.6. Now these statements will appear in the minutes, and the councillors have been provided with copies of those statements, so that is something that councillors can have regard to in the decision making for those items. Got a statement from those present before questions?
Yes.
Having dealt with the written statements that have been received, I open the floor to any person present that wishes to make a statement. Is there? I'll start with you, Mr. Woodward, if you would like to come forward.
This is much nicer sitting at the table. It feels, compared to the lectern, which is a little bit political rally, and this is more like a bit of a natter. Ben Woodward, 77 Whitfield Street, Bassendean. My statement this evening is in relation to agenda item 12.6, specifically the proposed changes to the policy governing briefing sessions. Briefing sessions are part of a process for good decision making. And that process starts, as I understand it, with councillor workshops, proceeding through briefing sessions, and then ultimately you're as informed as you can be to be making good decisions when it comes to voting at OCMs on the officer's recommendations. The ability for ratepayers and residents to ask questions publicly at a briefing session and have those questions answered publicly at briefing sessions contributes to that good decision making. In the officer's report, there's no specific justification for or pertaining particularly to the removal of public question time at briefing sessions. The overarching justification given for the policy review and amendments is efficiency and effectiveness. And in the context of briefing sessions being part of a process of good decision making, unless you as councillors have been presented with evidence, documented evidence, not anecdotal evidence, that having question times for the public in briefing sessions reduces the efficiency and effectiveness of good decision making, you have to reject the officer's recommendation tonight in its current form. And if it hasn't been demonstrated to you, to your satisfaction, that the removal of public question time from briefing sessions will increase the efficiency and effectiveness of your ability to make good decisions on behalf of the community that has elected you to represent them, you have to reject the officer's recommendation in its current form tonight. That is all.
Thank you for that statement, Ben. Madam, if you would like to come forward. You had your hand up before.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Sue Conway, 119 Guildford Road, Bassendean. Oh, thank you. And I wanted to say what this gentleman just finished saying, except I can't say it as well as he did. But I just wonder why the time for public statements and questions has been limited. I mean, isn't that how the council keeps in touch with the community of Bassendean and to know their concerns and that? And so I think, if anything, it should be lengthened. But then again, I'm not a councillor, so yeah, but I think it's very important that the community is able to ask questions, make statements, and let things be known to the councillors, so you all are aware of what's happening in the community and are not being sort of, separated from us. So, and while I'm on the subject, about the voluntary bus service, now that was, I thank you all for bringing it back, It's done so much good for so many people, elderly people who need it. And so on their behalf, I thank you all. But that wouldn't have been known if we were not able to let it be known. So, you know, and there are so many other things that are just as important. So I think it isn't a good idea to limit our time. Maybe increase it would be better. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that statement and for that positive feedback. Was there anybody else that wanted to make a statement? I'll take that as a no. We now move on to questions from members of the public. Now, the councillors have been provided with questions which were directed to the town by Mr. Don Yates, to which responses have been provided by or prepared by the administration, and those responses, along with the questions raised by Mr. Yates, will appear in the minutes, and those questions and answers have been provided to councillors, so councillors will be able to have regard to that information as it pertains to any items on the agenda. That is the questions that have been received to date. I do open the floor to questions from members of the public, if there's anybody present. Aaron, I believe, if you come forward, please. Yeah, have a seat.
Aaron McKay, 33 North Road, Bassendean. Just like to ask the question about where we're at with our current rangers. Last time I spoke to a ranger, their hours had been cut. I was just wondering if that was a decision on financial reasons or just purely not having enough rangers to fulfil the hours that they were currently doing prior to that.
Thanks, Aaron, and through the chair, I'm happy to jump in, and if I need support, I'll look to my colleague, the Director of Community and Planning. But the hours weren't cut. We lost 2 rangers to other local governments in the region, so we were down 2. We have recruited 1, and we're in the process of, we've done interviews, and another one will be employed shortly. And the decision going forward about whether there are any more rangers will be a subject of a future council decision. But at this stage, we're trialling an after-hours service for weekends and after-hours with the City of Bayswater, which in my mind is an expanded service because we were never previously operating a 24/7 service, where for emergency situations we now have that available to our ratepayers, and we are then invoiced based on the call-out rate with the City of Bayswater. So we are currently at 1. We are recruiting 2, which will give us a good span of hours Monday to Friday, typically to what this community is used to. And then weekends we have an expanded set of hours through City of Bayswater.
Okay. With the rangers and that the town of Bassendean have, you've just said that there's only 1 sort of thing, and the last time I spoke to that particular ranger sort of thing, I kind of felt that she was a bit, not her gender or anything, a bit cautious about some activities because she had no backup to support her if something happened. I'll see other councillors use rangers with surveillance cameras on their vehicles so that they can at least have some sort of thing, or a body camera on the actual ranger themselves. I was just wondering if that was something that the council looked at.
Yeah, we're fully aware of that, and body-worn cameras are on the way, and we are aware of that situation with our current ranger, and we have a duty of care to make sure that we manage that as best we can, hence why we're recruiting, and hence why we do have support from the local police. If it's a situation where we think it requires police support, police will provide it. They only need to be asked, and we also have support from Bayswater for major or known instances of a dangerous dog, for instance, that might be requiring 2 people, that we call on those people for support. So our 1 ranger at the moment knows that that support's there and should not put themselves in a position, or if they feel uncomfortable, they should retract themselves from that position and then seek those other alternatives. But it should only be for a temporary period because we are recruiting.
Yeah. And just one slight thing on that. Has the council looked at, with the money that they're currently I'd say not spending on rangers because they can't. Have they looked at more surveillance CCTV in certain areas to help manage security around, you know, parks and Bassendean town infrastructure sort of thing? Because on Sunday night at 6:56, White Nissan Patrol drove down to Point Reserve, dumped about 30 odd tyres, and then drove back out without any sort of hesitation. If the town had some sort of CCTV, they could have a number plate for that particular person and then look at prosecuting those sort of people that are currently, you know, just getting away with things because the town has no CCTV at all.
Yeah, good point. We do have limited CCTV. It's not on the current agenda given the cost of CCTV. The cost of the installation is one thing, but it's the monitoring and the compliance. And where do you start? Is Point Reserve in the top 10? Is it in the bottom 20? I'm not sure. So where do we start? And we use police stats and we use our relationships with the police to find out where are the hotspots, and if they suggest we need some kind of CCTV, that's when we'll look at it. But in my mind, we can't afford the technology to have it all the way down the main street and in every public place. It would send us broke. So at this stage, there is no plan to put isolated CCTV in unless it's supported by crime statistics. So what you're saying at Point Reserve to me is an isolated incident. And yes, it'd be nice to say that we could afford to have a camera down there, but we couldn't justify it. And then if we have one there, do we have one at, you know, Bindaring and Sandy Beach and Ashfield and the shops and Son districts? And so it's Jubilee, Ashfield, I could go on and on.
Yep. I just noticed at least one incident a month there I have to call the police to for antisocial semi-behaviour sort of thing. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Yep, please come forward.
Alan Copleston, 81 Parker Street, Bassendean.
Thank you.
My question reflects the two statements you had before about the question time. So the proposed amendments include structural change to reflect the purpose of the council briefing session. This is a quote in your report. To provide a forum for the public to better inform themselves on the items on the upcoming council agenda, and for the community members to make deputations or statements pertaining to the items on the agenda, thereby giving council members the opportunity to consider this information prior to making decisions at the upcoming ordinary council meeting. Removal of the public question time and questions in writing reflecting the intent of the council briefing sessions is for council members to better inform themselves by asking questions of the officers and those members of public making public deputations. So my question is, how does the removal of question time reflect the council's intent to effectively inform and engage the community about local services and events and council matters? How can you inform and engage the community if the community can't raise issues via question time? Engagement's a two-way process.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I might take that. And if
It's probably a rhetorical question, like.
Oh no, it's probably good to clarify and put it on the record because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in my review. So, first of all, the Local Government Act, a briefing session is not a formal meeting of council. It is something that some councillors adopt, some councils don't adopt. There are a number of councils larger than this council that don't have a briefing session, but seem to manage quite all right. So what is the purpose of a briefing session? The briefing session is to inform elected members on the reports that the officers have prepared. Ours are still open to the public. The fact that you can make a deputation if you're an affected person, or you can make a statement because you're an affected person, remembering this is not a community engagement session. This is about informing people about what is on the agenda for that particular month. The next Tuesday, you can ask any question you want, you can make any statement you like about any matter, about services, rates, waste, whatever you like. But the briefing session is about informing councillors and giving an opportunity for those affected by one of the items on the agenda, such as a planning advice around a shed, and you're an affected neighbour, you're able to come here and put a statement and we'll make a deputation. I'm not sure a question adds to the informing piece. If you feel strongly about something, you'll make a statement to say, I'm affected by this because the overshadowing of that particular garage is affecting the way I live. Statement. I'm not sure how a question is going to help inform the outcome. If you want to if you have a question, you can email the officer, because under that particular example, you would have been sent as an affected neighbour an opportunity to make a community comment. So that's your first opportunity. The second opportunity is to pick up the phone or email any councillor here tonight. You don't have to wait. The other opportunity is you email the town of Bassendean and a relevant planning officer will get back to you and respond to your questions. If you're not happy with that, you can pick up the phone and ask to speak to me. There are multiple opportunities for this community to engage. A briefing session is not a formal meeting of council. So to say that we're taking something away, I could argue that is something that you might not normally have at another jurisdiction. So it is about being efficient and effective to make important decisions. We are not taking anything away. You have enough touch points to ask a question, and you don't need to wait till a rainy Tuesday night to ask that question. You can do it from the comfort of your lounge room with an email. You can pick up the phone during business hours. You can contact your local councillor, and that's what they're elected for.
But the question time, what you got now, it's actually a public forum. People can see that question being asked.
It's still a public forum. The agenda session is still public. The next week, tonight, is a public forum. So you can ask the question tonight.
Yeah,
Is your question a week before the council meeting?
If I ask a question at a briefing session, then the councillors have got time to consider that question before the meeting, where if I ask a question now, everyone's going, well, maybe I need to investigate that, and they haven't got time. It's just like
no, you can email the councillor any time about that item. You don't need to wait till that Tuesday night. And I'll probably say this too, that the question you're asking is probably going to go to a technical officer. It's not going to go to a councillor. A councillor is there to inform themselves on what is on the agenda. If you have a technical planning question, it'll be an officer that'll need to respond to it. And if I don't have that manager here or that staff member, it'll be taken on notice. So you're not going to get the answer that night anyway. But you will get the answer before the council meeting, and so will the councillors. So everything you're telling me can be resolved in another way. So there's a perception issue that you're missing something, but I'm telling you it won't make a difference to the effective running of a meeting and the decision-making process. And I'm happy to go on the record with that, and I am tonight because this is a live recording.
Okay. It'll be up to the councillors when they come to vote on that particular part.
Thank you. Were there, Mr. No? Please, thank you.
Ben Woodward, 77 Whitfield Street. It is unfortunate that questions come after statements. It's a little bit around the wrong way, because from some of the things that said, I would have some statements, but I'll stick with the protocol. If you could have a look at page 209 of the attachments. I'll wait. Towards the bottom of that page in blue, you will see the words transparent and accountable crossed out. This is in relation to 12.6 and the changes proposed in the new policy affecting briefing sessions. And with the removal of those two words, the revised policy has no reference whatsoever to accountability or transparency. So through you, Deputy Mayor, I'd like to ask the officer why that is.
You can refer that to the...
I'd be happy to answer that question, because the fact that it is a public meeting makes it transparent. The purpose of having a policy is to use as least words as possible to make a point to guide the officer and the council. So by having a public meeting that's open to the public, it is by nature transparent, unless they've got a confidential item. So to actually put the word in there that it's transparent seems to me a waste of time. But if you want to have a different version, Ben, you go for it.
Well, I'm not going to argue semantics and the meaning of the word transparency. Is it possible that by removing question time, that actually affects the ability for the words transparency and accountability to be in there?
In terms of that
That's a
question, I suppose that's yeah, a matter of opinion for somebody reading the document. But certainly, if there's any other questions you have in terms of the structure or what's intended by
Sure.
the draft policy, are you
Sure.
able to ask those?
No, I'm all good. I'm all good. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ben. I think we've exhausted questions. No one left with a further question? Excellent. Thank you for your questions and statements this evening. We move on to petitions, of which I understand there are none. Now, confirmation of minutes. So for the ordinary council meeting held on the 30th of April and the special council meeting held on the 21st of May, if there's anybody who had wanted to move that, having cited those minutes, I'm happy to confirm those as a true record of what had occurred on those occasions. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Burke. And a seconder?
Just through you, Deputy Chair, just wanted to find out if we're talking about 9.1 or 9.2 to start with. Confirmation of minutes for the Tuesday the 30th of April, 9.1 first.
I was looking to move them together.
Together?
I might
Okay,
take
no.
confirmation
That's-
from governance to see if that's possible. Is that possible?
It's possible, it'd be preferable to move them separately, but it's
Well,
possible
you've
to move them
got me there, Councillor Rose. We will go for preferable. So let's go to 9.1. So the meeting for 30 April, you're going to move that, and Councillor Burke, you're happy to second? And if there was anybody that was against that, nothing indicated online or in the council chambers, so we will take that as carried. Now, moving on to item 9.2, so this relates to this special council meeting of the 21st of May 2024. Do I have a mover to confirm those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Carter, and seconded by Councillor Ames. If there was anybody that wanted to speak or vote against that, no indication of that in the council chambers nor online, so we will take that as carried. Now, moving on to business deferred from the previous meeting, there is none. External committee reports and updates. Mr. CEO, do we have any?
Neil, thanks.
So no such reports. So this moves into the officers' sorry, yes. Governance, what would that motion consist of?
the motion for 11, sorry. I'm aware there was no reports, but we generally have a motion for noting that there are no reports.
Okay, excellent. Is there a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Wilding, and seconded by Councillor Carter. Anybody against? No indication of that in the council chambers nor online, so we will take that as passed to say that there are no such external committee reports and updates. Moving into item the officers' reports. So the first item there is item 12.1, so that's the adoption of recommendations on block. Now, if we turn to councillors to page 11 of the agenda, there we have indicated that there are two items to be included in on block. So that's item 12.7, accounts paid, and item 12.8, the monthly financial report. So those are currently in on block. Now, there is a suggestion, I might put this to the council, if there were other items that potentially could be moved on block. I understand that from the briefing session, item 12.2 was the policy review for the local planning policy number 12, so residential development and fences. So that's an item to go out for advertising. So I thought I might just check with council if there was anybody that wanted to deal with that item separately. That is there any question or commentary in relation to that item 12.2, or is that something that can be added to on block? Was there nobody that wanted to deal with that item specifically? Madam Mayor?
I'm just asking, are we now inserting report items into en bloc. They've not been listed en bloc to begin with. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what appears to have happened with the agenda is, unlike the usual approach where there would be a whole lot of items that were in block and councillors would remove those, it seems that on this occasion, that particular policy, which is the only one that, to my mind, is potentially one which could be moved on block, given that the others require decisions with the appointment of people or to deal with alternate notices of motion which have been circulated. So in the council chambers, nobody has indicated that they wish to deal with that particular item outside of en bloc. So it's to you, Madam Mayor, unless you wanted to ask questions or to discuss that item. It would only be that item 12.2, which is to go to advertising. So just wanted your view on that.
I was only going to ask how long it's going to be advertised for, so I was going to ask that question. Apologies, I did mean to get some questions on that item out. I understand that the particular planning officer is not in the chamber tonight, so...
Look, in light of that, for that question, I mean, procedure would suggest that that's something which needs to be asked in that item, so perhaps we will proceed to en bloc as is currently indicated, yes, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
So with the items, simply items 12.7 and 12.8 that we're looking to move on block, do we have a mover for that? Councillor Ames, and seconded by Councillor Wilding. Is there anybody that wishes to speak or vote against? Do you have your hand up, Madam Mayor, or is that from before? Okay, thank you.
Again, apologies.
All right. So no indication in the council chambers or online that anybody wishes to speak or vote against that, so we'll take that item as carried. Thank you. Now we get into the policies that were not, the reports that were not moved on block, so that brings us to item 12.2, which is the policy review that we were just discussing for consideration to be included in on block. I might give that over to the CEO, who can direct that one accordingly.
Thanks, Chair. I'll seek some clarification, but in my mind it's a 30-day advertising period, but I'll just seek whether I got that right from the Director of Community Planning.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I am going to have to check, but I would assume it's 30 days as well. I'll make sure I get back to the Mayor tomorrow.
Madam Mayor, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, sincere apologies. I failed to put my questions in writing during the week, so I do sincerely apologise to the staff and the CEO in respect to that. So again, happy with that, with the Ms Brennan's response. Thank you.
Did any councillors have any further questions? Unless there's more to be said about that, which I don't think there is, given the job that had been done and the discussions that had been had in the briefing session, I might ask for a mover, Councillor Ames, and a seconder, Councillor Wilding. So that's item 12.2. I'd ask if there's anybody that intends to speak or vote against that item. I see no indication in the council chambers nor online. So I take that as there are no votes against and all in favour for that item. Thank you. Moving on to item 12.3, which is the elected member representation for the Metropolitan Regional Road Group. Again, I'll turn that over to the CEO to introduce that item.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. The officer's recommendation is there for everybody. I think we talked about this last week at the briefing session, but importantly tonight we do need to run a vote and to have two councillors nominate, one as the council representative, and we need a deputy council representative. So I think I might open it up to the floor to you to call for nominations, and we can then fill these positions.
And just in terms of that, there was the position and the deputy. So would we start with the position itself?
Yeah, position itself first.
So call for any nominations from the floor for councillors that would like to be involved in that. I have Councillor Carter, and I see nobody else wishing to challenge Councillor Carter.
Deputy Chair, I'll be in support of Councillor Carter in the role. Thank you.
And Councillor Carter to be ably supported by Councillor Ames, unless there is anybody else that would like to pry that role from him. Excellent. Well, we have the team of Councillors Carter and Ames, so if we could record that in the minutes. Councillor Ames?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. That was my support for Councillor Carter for the council representative. But whilst I have the lectern, I'd also like to nominate Councillor John for the Deputy Council Representative whilst I've got the floor. So thank you very much.
Sorry for that misunderstanding. Councillor, you're happy to...
Happy to accept the role.
Excellent. Thank you. So Councillor Carter in the role and John as the Deputy, not Councillor Ames. In terms of that, so we've filled those positions. So Councillor Ames to move and seconded by Councillor Burke. Just got in there. All right, so on that item, unless there's anybody who wishes to vote against that item with those roles as filled, I see no indication of anybody wishing to speak or vote against, nor online, as we take that one as passed. Thank you. Which item next? I think we move on to 12.4, so the low-cost urban road safety program, if that's something you'd like to open on.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We did discuss this last week, but given that we still have Doug with us, and I'd just like to commend Doug, he's got one more day with us as the Acting Director of Infrastructure. He's doing a handover with Shane at the moment, and then we'll be departing the town of Bassendean. But just while I've got the lectern, I'd like to publicly acknowledge his support over the last 3 or so months, and to say that he's been an asset to the town, and I would imagine that we would be forever grateful for the support that he's given in his 3 days per week. So Doug, I'm going to throw you this one now.
Thank you for your kind words. Basically, as we discussed last week at the briefing, the Low Cost Urban Road Safety Program is a program that's promoted by Main Roads and basically offers funding to local governments to undertake some low-cost treatments in their areas based on a priority basis, looking at accidents and other statistics that they look at. So I think 5 areas have been nominated for Bassendean. We're suggesting we go in there with 2 of those areas in the first instance to see how the program goes, and then we can look at other areas as we progress further.
Thank you for that explanation. Did any councillor have a question in relation to that item? Councillor Ames?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the officer in charge. Just a question in regards to the timeliness of when these are going to be actioned. Obviously, we've got the 24-25 financial year. Success Hills, I'm not too sort of concerned about, but in regards to Jubilee Reserve, in regards to the high participation of and activation of that area, during, I suppose, footy season and cricket season and so on and so forth. Do we have a sort of a Gantt chart or a schedule of works about when that particular area might be activated?
Through the Chair, there's no specific program at this stage because first we have to go out and undertake some consultation in exactly what's going to happen. But I think any consultation would also play into the fact that we may need to look at the timing of those projects. Obviously, we'd like to try and get those 2 projects done within the 24-25 year. Then we can look at how successful they are and what level of community engagement there is as we do it to look at the time frame for the future projects. But we wouldn't want to be in there doing major works when there's a football final on, for example, so we'd have to be cognizant of that.
Right, any further questions? I'll seek a mover for that item. Councillor Ames, and seconded by Councillor John. Thank you. All right, was there anybody that wished to speak or vote against that item? No indication of anybody against in the council chambers nor online, so we'll take that as passed. Moving on to item 12.5, which is the town's advocacy priorities. So I'll turn that over to the CEO to speak on that item.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and through you, yes, we did discuss this at length last week in the briefing session. it did emanate from a notice of motion from the Mayor, which I thought was quite timely, given we do have an election coming for state and federal governments in 2025. We do have some projects on our books that we are short of funding, and we also have some aspirations to develop more infill in the town, particularly on land that we don't own. They're Crown Reserve lots. So it is a way to advocate for the government to get on and start progressing the excision of those land parcels and the building of high-rise in our town, so we can end up with a greater population density in our main street near the train lines, which contribute to the financial sustainability and the vibrancy of our community. And the last one, of course, which is a subject later on tonight, is the Bassendean Oval redevelopment. And it's probably our largest undertaking that we will undertake in a number of years. At this stage, I'm suggesting, because we don't have the feasibility study or the master plan completed, but we're on that journey, it'll be about acknowledging to government that we do have this major project which is transformational for this community, and to put them on notice that there will be a significant ask in future years post the election. And particularly, we should have information soon around what the next phase of the design phase will cost. And typically the design phase, once we've done the master planning and the community accepts our findings and they want us to go on with it, there's probably $400,000 or $500,000 in planning that we'll have to undertake with detailed design and costings. And we've funded this first round ourselves with support from Swan District Football Club. But I would imagine if it's $400,000 or $500,000 that we could be advocating for that as stage 2 to be paid for by state and federal governments prior to the major capital works program starting. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Councillor Reams. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, I'd say to the CEO. There was some question throughout the week after the briefing session in regards to if we as a town are endorsing priorities or are we endorsing projects, and whether the documentation that we're going to be utilising to such funding opportunities, are we going 1, 2, 3, or are we saying we've got these 3 projects, how would you like to support or fund them?
Yeah, and that was a good point raised last week. So taking that on board as the next stage from this, I think for the purpose of the report, the way they're written is fine, but when we go out and produce the glossy, and then we start knocking on doors and making appointments to see politicians, the glossy doesn't need to say 1, 2 and 3, it can just be our projects. Obviously when we're talking to them though, it'll be around things about timing will come into it, and what we need support with immediately is Jubilee, because we've done the work. And then the other one's an advocacy role with the state government anyway, but the Bassendean Oval one could be elevated in that respect because it is funding the design phase. Could potentially be $400,000 or $500,000, so that could come in as the next highest priority. There is always a danger by putting something in that's worth 5.5 million or something that's worth 500,000, and they pick the cheap one because they want your vote and they say, oh, we've given you something to go away. So I think that depends on the presentation you have and the relationship that you form with the relevant politicians.
Just a follow-up question to that, will that glossy document come over our table, or is that something that we give you that we delegate to you to send out? Because I think it'd be great for, once that glossy has been knocked up, for us to, as a council, cast our eye over it.
Yeah, definitely. It won't come back to a council meeting for a decision, but it will not go out without council support through a workshop or the CEO bulletin, and feedback will be taken before we hit the print button. Thanks.
I noticed that we had a question online. Madam Mayor, if you wanted to ask your question.
Thank you very much, but Councillor Ames took the question right out of my mouth, so thank you very much. It's been answered.
Good to hear that we are in sync. I might just follow on from Councillor Ames' question with a question of my own. So in terms of these projects and obviously having different values, I mean, one's 5.5, one might be only 500,000. These priorities are able to change over time. So say if the Bassendean Oval got to a stage where larger amounts of money were required, would that then, not to suggest that any item leads the others, but that then might be the headline item if the amount is higher than the Jubilee amount, if unfortunately the state and federal governments haven't come to the party earlier to give us that money, and so it then becomes the case that Jubilee and the Bassendean Oval we're seeking those funds at the same time if we are unsuccessful. Not to foreshadow that we would be, but just on the off chance that we are.
Yeah, I think the policy, through you, Mr Chairman, and thanks for the question, the policy itself talks about an annual review with Council during the budget workshop process. So the more information that we have annually, then obviously this document gets looked at and changed accordingly, and priorities change, and we will have more information to inform what the ask is, and more justification to make our case. So I think by adopting the policy that's attached to this officer's report, it gives us that ability to review annually and make changes as we go.
So it would be envisaged going forward that this would be a tool whereby Council would communicate to community and other levels of government what the priority is. So this is something we would envisage seeing year in, year out going forward.
It will be year in, year out. Sometimes it will be changed, sometimes it might not, but particularly in the lead up to a state and a federal election, it's significantly more important, particularly about 9 to 12 months out seems to be the sweet spot, and given the Bassendean Oval project's only just undergoing its feasibility, the timing is out from us to be having a real impact at state and federal election for significant capital works. And we can't sell a vision because we haven't got a project yet.
I'm satisfied with that explanation. Did anybody else have any further questions? I will then call for a mover to that item. Councillor Wilding, thank you, and a seconder, Councillor Carter. So seek any indication of anybody wishing to speak or vote against that. There's none in the council chambers. I have no indication online either, so I will take that as everybody in support of that. Thank you. Moving on to item 12.6, the review of council policies. Now, with this item, I understand that in addition to the officer's recommendation, that two proposed amended, stand correct, two alternate notices of motion have been put forward. So, as is our procedure, if there is anybody that was wanting to move the officer's recommendation, I first give them that opportunity. So was there anybody present or online who wanted to move the officer's recommendation? I see that there isn't. So I leave the floor open now if there is anybody that wish to move either of the two alternate motions that have been circulated today. Councillor Carter, what do you intend on moving?
I would like to move version 2, item 2.6, that council adopts the amended council policy consent from acting chief executive officer, and 2, retains the current existing policies for council member ICT and council briefing session, and 3, revokes the Town of Bassendean advisory group policy.
Okay, so for the purpose of the record, that is a alternate version which has been circulated to councillors, so councillors are aware of what Councillor Carter is referring to. So Councillor Carter having outlined that alternate that she's seeking to move, I call for a seconder. Councillor Burke, thank you. Now, I might allow... do you want to talk about that first?
Only if I have a question.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Carter, if you wanted to just give a exposition on that item, the floor is yours.
Certainly. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My reasons for this and for wanting to retain particularly the briefing session policy is that we have very little forums in Bassendean for the residents to talk to councils or for councils to understand what residents feel about things, particularly since we've lost our local newspaper. There's none of that to and fro that we used to get in that. And I've always felt that Bassendean is a progressive council for inclusion and for transparency and for ability to talk to your local councillors. is something that I wouldn't give up lightly. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of that, move to the seconder, don't we? Give the seconder an opportunity to, if they wish to add anything to Councillor Carter's sentiment.
Thanks, Councillor Polifka. I guess further to Councillor Carter's points, I recognise there are multiple ways that community may wish to engage with council and with administration, and I don't think we should be reducing those. If anything, we should be encouraging community to still look at options and provide those options to them to engage. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Burke. You have any questions?
I was hoping to get a question. Councillor.
No, Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I did have a quick question around the ICT policy, which I feel is going to be sort of swallowed up in the rest of the debate, so I'll get in quick on that one. The policy has a 60% of the total allowance proposed. I'm just seeking to understand where that number has come from. I understand that the advice is that 100% wouldn't be justifiable, but why would 100% be more justified than 95% as potentially raised before?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Carter. Councillor Walding. So look, we did some figures based on the following assumptions. The assumptions were that a proportion of a mobile phone monthly rental, let's assume that a mobile plan of $100 a month these days is about, it's probably on the higher end, but we're being generous. So 50% would be proportion to council business. So $100 a month, 50%, $50. Proportion of home internet charges, we've assumed a home plan of $100 per month and proportion 50% to council business. Again, we think quite generous, or I think quite generous, given that councillors would have already had a mobile phone and home internet in place. That's not before they were councillors. So it's proportioning a cost. Proportion of home printed consumables and stationery, assume $50 per month, noting the move to digital, so less requirement for printing. And we've added in a home printer cost annualised and proportioned over council business. We've assumed the printer would cost $1,000, which again is quite generous in these days. Depreciated over 4 years of a council term, so 50%, so $125 per annum for the printer costs, which estimated to come out at $1,925 per annum. We've wound that up to $2,100 to come to the 60%, and that's how we've aligned at that $2,100 per annum.
Yep, further question?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Sarah, for your answer. I think the crux of my question is, if we've got working for the 60%, and councils has been advised that anything between 60 and 100 is acceptable, how does that 61 to 99 become acceptable if we haven't got working for that? I'm just seeking to understand the, the logic behind the options to council.
Yeah, well, it's a good question in relation to some of the questions about accountability we've had tonight from the members, from the public. So, quite simply, I've shared with you what is the Salaries and Wages Act and the Salaries and Wages Determination about getting a reimbursement, getting an allowance in lieu of a reimbursement. So a reimbursement would be you would have receipts, you would submit those every month based on your mobile phone, your printer cartridges, etc., and we would reimburse you. So an allowance in lieu of reimbursement is to do the same thing but make it much easier for the administration and for the councillor, rather than collecting receipts every month and then consuming admin time producing payments back to councillors. So in my mind, the Act is very clear. It quite clearly says we are reimbursing expenses, but we're using an allowance to do it. So the expenses we should be reimbursing should be expended by the councillor. So if this council can demonstrate that they spend 90% on those items, then we would pay that. Nobody's arguing you don't deserve to be reimbursed for expenses you've incurred in doing your role as a councillor. What we're trying to find is what that percentage is. The Act is also very clear in that if devices are provided to you by the town of Bassendean, such as a laptop, then you can't also claim for a laptop because you've been provided one. So to me that says if you were to get 100%, we would be a council that said to elected members, We do not provide any devices. You're on your own, so you would go out and buy everything you need, and we would then argue that the maximum allowance would be payable. So the fact that we do provide a device says to me 100% is too far, but the issue is where is the sweet spot, I suppose, and that's up to council to determine tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If you'll indulge me for one final question. If council wasn't happy with the number but didn't have a more solid number, could this be something which is workshopped and brought back to council at another time if the policy wasn't successful tonight? Noting that the proposed alternate motion is simply to retain the current policy, not to reject the proposed one.
I'm not, in my mind, I'm not sure it needs to be workshopped. I think we all have better things to do than workshop something like this. I think there is a responsibility from all of us to make a decision in the best interest of the Act and the community, because it's their money. I'm not sure 100% correct, and I have circulated an email tonight based on your question. Then I think we are on shaky ground, but my duty is to inform you of what the Act says. The Act has a head of power which says you cannot have a windfall gain. So if you vote tonight to take 100%, you have been provided advice that you probably shouldn't be doing that. But if you want to do that, I'm quite comfortable that I've done my due diligence to provide you with the information necessary to make an informed decision.
Any further questions? Councillor Ames?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Chair. I'm going to sort of take my time here because this has obviously been bantered around for quite some time. We want to make sure that by the end of tonight, we're all sussed out. We're all, leaving out of here with at least our heads held high and taking some advice from our diligent CEO. Chair of Governance, you might need to wordsmith a bit of this stuff for me. And I'm not going to ask any questions, but I'd like to maybe put an amendment forward based on version 2, if it would be accepted around the council table. Joe, am I able to do that?
Yeah, you certainly outline what the amendment is, and then Councillor Carter can determine.
You can. There's two options. You can certainly place an amendment if it doesn't change the intent of the alternate, because we're currently the officer recommendation. Just so we know where we're at, the officer recommendation lapsed. We are now considering an alternate. You may certainly apply an amendment to that. See if you can get a seconder and put that before, and then that could, if that was carried, that would become the substantive motion. That is what's available to you now.
Just in terms of that, if the two councillors that moved and seconded were happy to absorb that into the substantive, would we need to vote or not?
If the mover and the seconder were accepting of the rewording once they hear it, that would be acceptable, yes.
Okay. Councillor Ames, let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, here we go. I'd also like to move version 2 that council adopts the amended council policy for the appointment of an acting chief executive officer. Adopts the amended council policy for B, the council member ICT, and retain but the majority of the council briefing session information. And I note that in the attachments that there's been a recommendation to reduce deputation time from 10 to 5 minutes, that I'd like to see that maintained within the amended draft document.
So essentially that would be the existing policy, but with the amendment of deputations reduced from 10 to 5 minutes in duration. Thank you. Okay.
Can I, as
Councillor Carter, are you happy with that?
Well, as the mover, can I just clarify, the only change to the alternate motion is to reduce the deputation time from 10 minutes to 5. You're keeping everything else. The question time, you're keeping the statement time and all.
For the record, that's correct.
Then I'm quite happy with that. 5 minutes is usually how they go. But we've got...
I see that Mayor Hamilton would like to speak. We can't hear you.
Could I ask Councillor Ames to read that out again? Because the way I heard it was accepting the council member ICT policy, the draft policy. So I just want to check the wording of what Councillor Ames read out, if he could read it out again.
Absolutely. You ready to go, Madam Mayor?
Yep.
The council adopts the amended council policies for the appointment of the acting chief executive officer. B, council member ICT, and the council briefing session with the change to reduce the deputation time from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, as is clause in the track changes document 3.6.
Just with that, Councillor Ames, do you need to refer to that policy, or can you just simply say that the existing policy is to be amended strictly with the deputations being changed from 10 to 5? So I don't think we necessarily need to pick up the draft, because when you're making such a simple alteration to the existing, would that be of assistance to you, Mayor Hamilton, if it was just to confirm that it's the existing policy, but with deputations reduced from 10 to 5 minutes in duration?
Okay, I'm just flagging that if I will be arguing against that if it makes it into the motion moved by Councillor Carter, and I'll flag that I will move the other alternative motion that I sent through this afternoon. If the debate on these fails, will come to my other alternative as the remaining option. But
so you're foreshadowing the other alternative should this alternative amendment, alternative notice of motion fail.
Should they both fail, because I'm flagging that I'm going to vote against the amendment being put up by Councillor Ames, and yeah, so I'll leave it at that and see where we end up.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I should have asked before, and sorry to put you in this position, Councillor Burke. Councillor Carter has accepted that she's willing to accept Councillor Ames' amendment into the substantive. Are you similarly agreeable to accepting Councillor Ames' amendment, or do we need to move to a vote on that?
Can I just clarify, my moving of the to leave the policies as they are, perhaps I prefer just to leave the policies they are, but if there's the feeling of the councillors to reduce the time, I'd go along with that, but at the moment I prefer to leave the policy as it is.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, I'm not sure if this is a point of order, a valid point of order, but prior to the meeting we flagged the potential of considering the different policies as separate votes. I feel like the foreshadowed motions and the amended motions and the various things floating around complicate that significantly. Is it and this might be a question for you, Joe, is there an option now to consider each policy individually and amend them individually as we go, rather than what we're attempting to do at the moment?
I think if I am hearing it correctly, is that the concern is that in the version that Councillor Carter and Councillor Burke have agreed to, it notes that the wording at 2 retains the current existing policies for council member ICT, and I do believe that this is the concern, from what I'm gathering from the Mayor, that she has. I don't believe that Councillor Ames, was that your intent to retain that? If that's not the case, I can see where you're going there.
No, it's not to retain the existing policy. It's to adopt the new policy that's been created.
Does that assist? And yes, if you wanted to, you could consider them separately if that's what you required.
If that is a possibility, given that the two motions are fundamentally quite different, and I would also like to move a minor amendment to the ICT policy, and that would be significantly easier if it was considered separately.
Just in light of that, and obviously we had circulated that possibility today, the way I would see it, and I'd ask anyone to correct me if that isn't the case, that in terms of the officer's recommendation, that the two parts which are not controversial are the adoption of the amended policy for the appointment of an acting chief executive officer, and we would then roll that together with the revocation of the Town of Bassendean advisory group policy, because I understand nobody to be taking issue with either of those two changes in policy. So we would suggest that that would be the first item, then, or the first part to be voted on. Then we would move to the, just in order of how things are written there, the council member ICT as a separate item, well, not separate item, rather separate part within the item. And that then the council briefing session would be the third part upon which we would vote, because I do understand there to be a difference of opinion. So if governance is happy with that, I would perhaps we deal with the easiest items first. So that would be the adoption of the council policy for the appointment of an acting chief executive officer and the revocation of the Town of Bassendean advisory group policy. So those parts of the officer recommendation we would essentially be voting in favour of. Is that something we can?
So, if I may, presiding member, the issue that we have currently is that we do have an active motion, and the active motion was to deal entirely with the version 2. Councillor Ames had put forward an amendment to request whether the mover and seconder were agreeable. At this stage, I'm understanding that they are not. So where we're currently at is that Councillor Ames would be seeking a seconder to his amendment.
And just in terms of his amendment, given that that is contrary to the alternate that's proposed, is that something that's able to be accommodated as an amendment or not?
He can put forward any style of amendment that he wishes, but he does need to achieve a seconder to get it to be considered.
Okay, and Councillor Ames, I mean, there's two components to what you're moving, and I might just ask governance if Councillor Ames were able to separate those, because so to move an amendment in relation to the ICT and a separate amendment in relation to the council briefing sessions, is that something that would be able to occur, or does he have to move both of those together? Because I'm sensing there might be agreement for some and not for other parts of that.
May I ask a question?
Madam Mayor, please.
Okay. Given that the mover has not accepted the amendment, and given that the amendment is substantially different from what the mover has moved, would what not Councillor Ames be proposing be another alternative yet again? So my question is, it's not an amendment, it's actually another alternative, is it not?
May I just check your meeting procedures, because if you would call a point of order, I'm just going to check your points of order, and you could that could be how it could be dealt with. Please forgive me for a moment while I just check.
Mr. CEO, are we able to stand the meeting down for say 5 or 10 minutes to allow that to occur?
Yeah, we could take a mover to adjourn for 5 minutes while we check the rigs, and then a second.
Councillors Ames and Wilding, either mover or seconder. So we will adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We just worked out the best way to tackle this so that everybody's perspective can be put forward. From that, I understand that Councillor Ames is looking to withdraw his amendment for the time being. That's not to say that he won't be having a say on this, but just procedurally, he's going to withdraw for the time being.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Under advice, I'd like to withdraw my alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ames. Councillor Carter, I understand that you're looking to withdraw the substantive as well.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will withdraw my alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I might explain what we're going to, or what I'm proposing that we would do is so that each of these somewhat distinct items can be given due argument if required to separate those out. So we have the officer's recommendation, which essentially sought to do four things. Sorry? Oh, Madam Mayor?
Sorry. Thank you, councillors. I just wanted to foreshadow, and I do understand, Acting Mayor, that you will proceed with separating out these items, which I think is the best way forward. So thank you for that. I'm just foreshadowing that the alternative that I put up, if the items are separated out, I foreshadow that I will move those alternatives in their separated portions as per each policy. Okay? So in other words, the briefing one, I will cut out those pieces that relate to the other policies and just foreshadow moving the alternative that relates to the briefing, and we will debate and vote on the others as we see fit.
No, I understand the bulk foreshadowing for each of those two items and not the non-controversial one. So in terms of the items, there are four things which the officer had recommended. So that was the adoption of the amended council policy for the appointment of an acting chief executive officer. There was and then there were policies for the council member ICT, council briefing sessions, and then there was the revocation of the Town of Bassendean Advisory Group. So what I'm proposing that we do, and once I've finished I will seek a seconder in relation to that, is that from this item we'll be bundling together the adoption of, from the officer's recommendation, amended council policies for the appointment of an acting chief executive officer and the revocation of the Town of Bassendean Advisory Group policy. So that would be the first part upon which we would vote. The second part of this item is the council member ICT. And so the process there is that I will open the floor for anybody who wishes to move the officer's recommendation as our requirement, but it has been foreshadowed that in relation to each the council member ICT and the council member briefing sessions, that there is an alternate to each of the officer's recommendations for those. So the first item so that's the process that I propose. I think governance has that in broad terms. I'll take questions if there's any councillors who are uncertain with what I'm proposing. Otherwise, I would seek a seconder. Councillor Ames, thank you.
Sorry, I was going to second that. No, it's okay. Move on.
Oh, thank you. So I will seek any indication if there's anybody who wishes to speak or vote against what I'm proposing. I see no indication in the council chambers nor online. So we'll take that as moved. So that is the process that we will adopt. The next part, of course, then is to allow the CEO to speak on those two policies which we're bundling together. So that is if there is anybody who is prepared to move the officer's recommendation in respect of, and only in respect of, the adoption of the amended council policies for the appointment of an acting chief executive officer and the revocation of the Town of Bassendean Advisory Group policy. So that's what's being. Thank you, Madam Mayor. You're moving.
I'll move that one.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ames. Is there anybody that wishes to speak or vote against that part of the item? I see no indication of either anybody speaking or voting against, neither online or in the council chambers. We take that item as passed. Now we move on to the second part of that item. So this is to do with the council member ICT. Now, I know that Madam Mayor has foreshadowed, but as I understand, I'll get governance to confirm. Do we first need to make the officer's recommendation available for somebody to move, or are we able to go straight to the Mayor's foreshadowed?
The foreshadowed only comes into action if the motion is lost with regard to if anyone moves the second amendment.
Okay, so in relation to the council member ICT, the officer's recommendation, do I have a mover? Is it question or moving?
Deputy Mayor, if I could move it with a minor amendment, with that amendment being changing the threshold from 60% of the allowance to 80%.
There being no indication that anybody else was looking to move the officer's recommendation, and that's broadly, I would say, governance can correct me if I'm wrong, broadly consistent with the officer's recommendation, happy to have you move that, and we'll seek a seconder. Councillor Ames, question or moving?
Question, and sorry to sort of throw this into a spin. I just want to get some advice from the CEO. If the information provided by Councillor Whiting to increase that threshold would be still appropriate with the information that we've been provided from the recommended changes to the ICT policy.
That is purely a decision of council, and I would see no reason why it wouldn't be suitable.
I'll take Councillor Ames as seconding that officer's recommendation with the amendment of increasing that from 60 to 80%. So that is the item before everybody. Was there anybody that wished to speak against that item? So the officer's recommendation with that amendment. Nobody in the council chambers that wished to speak against that. Online, Madam Mayor, did you wish to speak against that? I can't hear you, sorry.
No, just confirming that the officer's recommendation is changed from the 60% for the ICT policy to 80%, is that correct?
That is my understanding of that's what is currently before us, yes.
Okay, and you already have a seconder, thank you.
Thank you. Any indication of anybody wishing to speak against? Okay, move on to the voting. Anybody wanting to vote against that? I see no hands raised in the council chambers nor online. So nobody voting against that. That is passed.
Can I please, just for cleanliness, that becomes a substantive. Can we just have a vote on the substantive? So that was the amendment.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So that is the amendment that has been included. I will then put it out again for the substantive. Is there anybody that wishes to speak against that? Councillor Wiley?
Just to clarify, Deputy Mayor, so we've just had a mover and a seconder and accepted the amendment. Do we need to have a mover and a seconder for the substantive motion?
Yes, so I'm happy to take the same mover and seconder again if you're...
Happy to move again, yes.
Yeah, so that's Councillors Wilding and Ames for consistency. If there was anybody that wished to speak against that, nobody in the council chambers nor online wanting to speak against it. Anybody wishing to vote against that? I see no hands raised against nor online. So that second part of this item is carried. So now we move on to the third part, which is the council briefing session. So again, I will open it to the floor if there's anybody who wishes to move the officer's recommendation in relation to the council briefing session revised policy. I see no one present in the chambers. Madam Mayor?
Deputy Mayor, for the benefit of the public, did you want the foreshadowed alternative to be read out, or I think the councillors already have a copy of all of that in front of them, do they not?
Look, I think we've exhausted the movement of the officer's recommendation, even with slight amendments in the chambers. So, look, happy to move on to your alternate. And look, I mean, whilst that is in front of councillors, and given the community interest, I think if your voice would allow it, it might be beneficial for you to read out the proposed changes that you're wanting to make to the officer's recommended draft.
Okay, that council adopts the council briefing session policy subject to the following amendments being made. that dot point, that the policy statement be amended to include public questions. Next dot point, clause 1.1, council briefing sessions are to be held 1 week prior to the ordinary council meeting, usually on the third Tuesday of the month, full stop, and delete the remaining sentence as contained in the draft policy attached to the OCM agenda. Clause 1.2 to be amended to include public questions. Clause 1.4, the last sentence to be amended to the following: in discussion with the CEO, a briefing session can be cancelled at the discretion of the presiding person. Section 2, amend the clauses of this section to enable public questions and statement time to be held as a combined session at council briefing sessions. Next point, reinstates original clause 2.4, that is 2.3 in the draft policy, with the following slight amendment: public question and statement time will be limited to 2 minutes per member of the public and limited to 2 verbal questions per person. Additional questions may be asked by a participant, but only after all persons who want to ask questions have done so, and if there is time remaining, noting, of course, that the presiding person and presiding person can extend question time. Next point, reinstate original clause 2.8, points A, B, C, B and C. Next point, reinstate original section 3, being questions in writing. Section 4, refer to amendments for section 2 to hold public questions and statements as a combined session. And that concludes that concludes my amendments. I'm happy to take questions on those.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps we'll allow that to occur from either councillors or the CEO. Did any councillor have a question to direct to our Mayor, Councillor Carter?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Could I ask or clarifications, because I'm not quite sure, the rolling up of question time and statement time, is that for, the two, question time and statement, that was 15 minutes each, so that makes half an hour. Is the new rolled up statement question time still going to be half an hour, or is it envisaged that that be cut to 15 minutes?
I can answer that if you like. All statement and question times have, in the current format, have 15 minutes, and if it's going to extend past 15 minutes, the presiding person can extend that time in 10-minute increments up to a maximum of 45 minutes. The reason I propose bundling question time and statement time together is because many people commence with a statement or a preamble leading into a question, and it seems inefficient to have people, to force them to stop halfway through. Sorry, we're not at question time, you must sit down, I'll call you up again. It seems inefficient from our residents' point of view to do that. And that's why I believe that statement time and question time should come together. And I believe it will save time in the long run, because people won't have to keep going backwards and forwards to their seat if they wish to participate in 2 separate question time and statement time. It also allows, as a presiding person, I can extend the time and allow that time to go through to a maximum of 45 minutes, which is in the old policy and in the draft new policy. So the timelines have not changed. I do not believe it will significantly alter the timing. If you take tonight, there were a few people in the chamber, but no one exceeded the time limit tonight. So I would think it would only be in extraordinary circumstances that we would have a push on that timeline.
Councillor Carter, a follow-up question?
I have just a follow-up question. So I'm still unclear. Are we talking about half an hour set aside for this bracket of the meeting, or are we talking about 15 minutes setting aside for this bracket of the meeting?
Would you like me to answer that or the CEO?
Please, Madam Mayor.
Okay. In the existing policy or the old policy, question time is 15 minutes, statement time is 15 minutes, but we can extend those. In the new draft policy, if they're both bundled together, it still stays at 15 minutes initially, but as per both policies, it can be extended by the presiding person in 10-minute increments through to a maximum of 45 minutes. So,
Madam Mayor, with that, would you be willing to, I suppose, make that more, specific, and with that where you've got the part, so amend the clauses of this section to enable public questions and statements to be held as a combined session at the council briefing session for of a total duration of 15 minutes. So just to make it explicit that in rolling those together...
No. That's not in the policy. The new policy and the old policy are at one in curtailing any of those things to a maximum of 45 minutes. My understanding of reading the new policy is that you can only extend the time to a maximum of 45 minutes. And the same with the old policy. It said the same thing, that you could only extend, although I might be wrong with that, Mr. CEO, it might have been half an hour as a maximum for question time in the old policy. But
I mean, would you be happy to expressly say what that period of time will be, just for the sake of clarity?
Okay. In both policies, the timeline initially is set at 15 minutes.
Yes.
And I think that that is a reasonable time. But what I'm alluding to is the presiding person at a briefing session can extend question time or statement time currently in 10-minute increments. I believe that that process would still exist under the new policy up to a maximum of 45 minutes total. I don't perceive that as being a problem. In the OCM, the same exists, except that the council can vote to extend the time rather than just the presiding person. But because the briefing is not the same as a council meeting, it's the presiding person in the briefing who gets to extend the timeline. And I don't want to limit anything to a maximum of 15 minutes, because that ability to extend the time has always existed in our policies, and it should exist for particularly when we've got contentious items and we have a lot of people in the chamber. So the standard time for people to address the council or to ask questions tends to be 15 minutes, and I prefer to keep it at that for consistency in the policies. But it does not mean that we are limited to 15 minutes as a maximum. The maximum time allocated is 45 minutes.
No, thank you for that clarification. I think that context will assist the administration to implement what you put forward. Councillor Carter, did you have any further questions, or has that clarified your query?
No, but I'm hearing and understanding that there's 15 minutes always with the mayor's ability, or the presiding member's ability, to extend that as wished. That's what I understand the case to be. So that means, to my understanding, that we actually are halving the time set aside for this particular item on the agenda.
So in terms of when you say when the items were combined, you expected that the combined item would have the combined period for each of them. So rather than 15 minutes, you expected that it would be half an hour, and it would be a maximum only in the sense that there was always that other mechanism that the Mayor has outlined to continually extend. So you would prefer to see that combined period of time for both questions and statements to be half an hour as opposed to 15 minutes? Is that essential?
Yes, I prefer to see, if we're going to roll up questions and statements, I prefer to see the time remaining that was usually allocated to both. I don't think for a moment that we're ever going to get to that point, but sometimes we do have contentious issues, and people should feel they have a right to have that bracket of time.
Okay, could I ask the CEO a question
Certainly,
on
Madam
this
Mayor.
one? Okay, Mr. CEO, given the powers of the presiding person in the chamber to run the meeting, do you see a problem with the presiding person extending time if there is, for instance, a particularly contentious item where you might have 200 people in the chamber? And I know that sounds extraordinary, but I do recall meetings 8-9 years ago where that was a frequent occurrence for about 4 months. So do you see a problem with the presiding person in their role extending a combined question statement time past the 45 minutes, even if it's in a policy?
No, I don't. I think I understand your motion and the intent, and I think there are mechanisms there to achieve exactly what everybody here is looking for. So I think combining statement and question time initially for 15 minutes, and then you have the authority based on reading the room. If there more people want to be heard, you keep extending it until you think the matter has been exhausted. And remember, some of the questions are going to be the same. So it's not in our best interest to let somebody ask a question that's been asked and answered, because that is not efficient or effective. So if there might be 50 people in the room, but if the same question has been asked 3 times, then we don't need to hear it again. So the time that you have allocated, which is a combined time of 15 to start the process, with increments of 10 at your discretion, would suit everybody.
Okay. But again, I would suggest that that comes back to myself as presiding person, or the acting mayor as presiding person, to request people in the audience not to repeat questions, but to it's very difficult to foreshadow if questions will be repetitive. However, if you have meeting after meeting, month after month, I could see your perspective there. So anyway, sorry, I have spoken enough. We're coming back to
No, thank you for introducing your item, and obviously councillors might want to ask further questions to decide whether they want to second, or maybe they want to move amendments based on the responses. Did any other councillor have a question regarding what the mayor has put forward? Councillor Ames.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, I'd like to support Madam Mayor in regards to her amendment that she's made as per the documentation. I'd like to see if she can also consider that has not been brought up but was brought up previously regarding the opportunity for 3.6 to be reinstated. Speakers cannot address the council for more than 5 minutes unless the presiding member agrees to an extension for deputations.
Okay, let me just rephrase that to see if I understand correctly, Councillor Ames. In the current policy, deputations can be up to 10 minutes, and then councillors can ask questions of the person doing the deputation. What is proposed in the draft policy is that deputations can be up to 5 minutes, and then councillors can ask questions. You're proposing that deputations go back to 10 minutes, then questions, is that right?
That's incorrect. I am supportive of the changes that have been tracked within the document. For speakers can address the council for no longer than 5 minutes. It was
Correct.
10, and the presiding member does have the option to be able to extend the deputation if required and support of council.
Yes, so that's already in the draft policy. So my amendments are only to certain aspects of the draft policy, and the remainder of the draft policy is as written.
Thank you.
Sounds like what you desire is already there, so I'll take you as the seconder for the mayor's alternate. Thank you, Councillor Ames. So there we go. We have this alternate part 3 to the item. And was there anybody that wanted to move any amendments of any sort? Councillor Carter, did you, or you were satisfied?
I can vote against.
You certainly may. Always looking to package things in a way that might be mutually agreeable, but that's fine. In terms of the item, certainly as you indicate, Councillor Carter, I will allow the Mayor to speak to Council as to why they should adopt her alternate motion as seconded by Councillor Ames.
Councillors, obviously this is a item which has evoked different responses from different people. I am very much in favour of retaining public question time. However, I do believe there are some possibilities for making the meeting process a little bit more efficient. Bearing in mind, of course, that as a presiding person, you always have the ability to extend timelines, to take more questions than what is. A presiding person can do many things in that role. It might take a while to learn all those things, but for instance, you had someone tonight where he should have only been able to ask 2 questions, but nevertheless went on to 3, maybe 4 questions. So these types of give and take exist in the council chamber, and for good reason, because all people are different and they all have different styles of communication. And trying to accommodate those different styles and trying to actually hear what our people have to say, our ratepayers, and trying to give them a fair go is what we're all about. However, we are also meant to run meetings as efficiently as possible. And so my aspiration to combine statement and question time together is, having been in the role for some time now, I have noted human nature and how often people lead into a question with a preamble. You can call that a statement if you like, but it is human nature for people to do that. And when they do that, I'm often asked to cut them off and say, look, are you asking a question or are you going to do a statement? And that in itself is time consuming. And then getting people to sit down and come back for the next session is also time consuming. So I think that we can be a little bit more efficient by understanding human nature and accommodating that somewhat. So hence I've made some amendments and I would ask you to support it. Thank you very much.
Seconder, if you wish to. Okay, I'll take that as reserving your right. Did I have anybody that wished to speak against this item? Councillor Carter. Yeah, absolutely.
I think in general this is a good idea, and I certainly would support rolling up question time and statement time, because I think that makes perfect sense. What I wouldn't like to see is a reduction in the time we give people to do this. So I also think too, I know that there is the ability to extend for quite some time, but it also depends on who the presiding person is. I've certainly been in meetings where the presiding person has been very, very strong in cutting people off and not allowing any talk. So our current mayor is much more accommodating and bending over backwards sometimes, but not every mayor or every presiding person has those qualities. So I would like to see it revert to back to the existing policy, as that's simpler. I'm quite happy with the bundling up of the question and statement time, but I don't want to see a reduction in time. Thank you.
Was anybody who wanted to speak in favour? I might just add in favour of it, and I certainly understand Councillor Carter's sentiments, and we are blessed to have a mayor that would use those powers judiciously, and if that weren't the case, then perhaps we could deal with the policy in a different way if and when that ceases to be. In terms of what we're looking to do, the deputations. So obviously we are reducing the period of time for the deputations, and I did have some time to think about that as to whether that's a good thing or not. And on balance, I think that it is, in that for me the most effective deputations are those which are straight to the point and that essentially outline the issues that somebody's wishing to raise. And the good thing about a deputation, even if it's of 5 minutes duration, as councillors, we're allowed to ask questions. So, and that's not included in that 5 minutes. So if you raise something of interest to council during your deputation, we're going to be interested. We're going to ask you questions and you're going to get to be able to elaborate on that point. So I think moving it from 10 to 5 minute deputations, and that's what they are, they're deputations, they're not dissertations, they're not meant to be of an unduly long length, I think is appropriate. So that was sort of the one which I'd had wrestled with. And I suppose the other good thing to come out of that is this particular item is to show that we did have quite a bit of community interest, and it's I think good for the communities to see that the way in which we interact with them is something that we constantly and consciously look at. So it's not just have a policy on the shelf and don't look at it. We do try and move with the times and adapt to the community's needs. So I think this has been a useful process for that. But yes, certainly can understand Councillor Carter's position in terms of wanting to give our community as the best opportunity to put forward their position. So that would just be what I'd reiterate in terms of deputations. If you're in a position where you need to make one, don't worry, if you say something of interest, we're going to ask you questions and you will get to elaborate. So that was why I would say, on balance, I'm going to vote in favour of what the Mayor has put forward. Thank you. Councillor Wilding.
Deputy Mayor, if I may speak again very briefly. I do understand the frustrations that this policy seeks to address, but fundamentally I don't agree that it is a problem that needs to be addressed in this way. I think I share the frustration with everyone around this table and in this room, hearing the same questions and hearing questions that are a little bit clumsy or not perfectly asked, but this is a democratic process, this is a democratic system. If we didn't want to hear from members of the public, we would be a board, not a council. I think the current system is fine for hearing members of the public. I think it's what we've all signed up for. I do take issue, Deputy Mayor, with your reference to the policy being able to be dealt with if we were to have a mayor who was less accommodating of questions. I think we should get the policy right, and the mayor should work around that. We shouldn't be writing policy on the fly to address the different styles of different mayors. If the current system is appropriate, as I see it to be, then the current policy should stand. And that's why I'm not supporting the item.
All right, we've got another 2 councillors. Does anyone wish to speak for or against? Or if everybody's exhausted what they want to say on this this item, I think we can put it to the vote. So on this one being the...
Do I get to close? Do I get to close?
I will allow it.
Okay. Just to highlight that the State Government, the Local Government Act is being reviewed at the moment. So possibly by the end of this year, the Ordinary Council meeting agenda standing orders will be possibly changed. So one of the changes that they're flagging is a standardised meetings procedures for all local governments, and that this will include possibly a 5-minute deputation time. I do know that across the metropolitan area there are variable times. We are definitely a council that has some of the longest deputation times. For instance, City of Swan, I believe the deputation time is 3 minutes. Bayswater, I believe it's 5 minutes. So there are variable time limits across the town, and they will change for our OCMs so that right across the WA, all meeting procedures will be standardised. So that's something to actually understand. Now, this particular briefing policy will obviously not fall underneath that because briefings are separate from OCMs. However, one can't ignore the trends that are being put forward, and our town is very generous in its timelines. And that's fine. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with generous timeline. to retain question time, to bundle it in with statement time, I think is efficient and will allow people to naturally address the council rather than being stop-start all the time. Deputations, I do believe that deputations could be more succinct, and that is not to disempower our community, but rather to say, get your dot points in order, address the council. But the other thing too is all of us as councillors have very much an open door policy with our community, and they are more than welcome to chat to us and to call us and to email us. So these types of engagements possibly are beneficial, not only in the format of our meetings and our public meetings, but also out of the meeting process, we get a better understanding. So I would encourage engagement through multiple different forums. So I do ask for your support on this policy, perhaps because I think we've addressed most of the issues, and there's nothing to stop an amendment to bring this policy back for review in 12 months' time. And I perhaps could suggest that as well, but I won't at the moment. But I would ask.
Madam Mayor, where it's a policy, we're dealing with brevity. Are you able to conclude?
Yes, I am. I'm concluding now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, this is obviously the most contentious item we've dealt with this evening, so I will ask for a show of hands on that. Madam Mayor, you can indicate your support or otherwise by, during the relevant time, turning on your screen and raising your hand so I can see it. Sorry, Councillor Wilding?
Apologies, Deputy Mayor. Would this be the appropriate time to procedurally move to foreshadow a motion to retain the existing policy if this is unsuccessful?
Yes, I'm happy to hear that.
To foreshadow that.
Thank you. All right, with that in place, so we have a safety net, I will ask for those who are in favour of so part 3 of this item, which is the alternate motion that's been moved by Madam Mayor, seconded by Councillor Ames, in relation to the business at council for briefing sessions. All of those in favour of the motion as put? Madam Mayor, Councillor Ames, and myself. All of those against? Councillor Wilding, Councillor Carter, Councillor John and Councillor Burke. So thank you, Councillor Wilding, for foreshadowing. If you could now present your motion, that would be good.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and hopefully this brings us to the end of this item soon enough. My motion is simply to retain the existing council briefing session policy.
Well, thank you for providing that in such simple terms. Councillor Carter, I know you are desperate to second that, so I will take you as a seconder. Closely run, Councillor John. So we have this motion, which I think we've possibly exhausted, and I'm happy to allow Councillor Wilding to make any comment she feels appropriate to make in opening this item.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very briefly, and just to add on to the little bit that I forgot in my previous debate, I think, we've talked a lot tonight about the efficiency of the public and the way they present to these meetings. I think it would benefit us to be reflective of how we've stumbled through this meeting tonight and acknowledge that the process is clumsy, but it's part of the process, and that we get there, and that we should extend the same grace to the public as we hopefully do to ourselves.
Councillor Carter? Is there anybody that would like to speak against or to this item? Councillor Ames.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against, and it's just to reiterate all the fantastic work that, all the fantastic stuff that our Madam Mayor was saying. We're trying to ensure that, the individuals that come to our council are prepared. We're trying to ensure that we as a council are not only efficient in what we do, but we are also accepting of what our residents and those people that come into the chambers want us here for, which is obviously to represent them. Look, there's no this policy isn't bad, but I think it could be fine-tuned, and that's what we've been trying to deliberate for the last half an hour. And, you know, I think this shouldn't come to our council if it needed to be changed, or sorry, if it shouldn't have been changed in the first place. So, you know, obviously there's going to be a decision that I'm not in favour for, but I'd just like to thank Madam Mayor and also the CEO in trying to get to a point where we could, you know, move forward with this. And I still believe that the Madam Mayor's amended would have been sufficient to ensure that we could move forward with this. So thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for
Point of order,
also
Deputy Mayor, we're not debating the previous motion. We're debating this one.
No, but I understand Councillor Ames was just, rather than reiterating chapter and verse what was said previously, just to be taking the benefit of the previous debate so that we could move forward as quickly as possible. But Councillor Ames, perhaps if there was anything further you had.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to speak in favour of the item? Look, I would speak against in that. I say that, look, it's somewhat, we've got a policy. A policy should change and evolve over time. So in terms of this item coming before council to look at ways in which it can be improved, and look, I'm not necessarily saying that that would be contracting the time that you know, members of the public would have to put forward their position. I think, as one of the questioners earlier asked, you know, maybe that time could have been extended. But I mean, my point would be, I find that it's a bit to say that we got the document right and it's right for all time. I think it is good from time to time for this document to find its way back before council, so we can either look to improve it or at least affirm that that document accords with the way in which we want to do things. So speaking against it, because I think the process was right, that this is something that would come before this council and be you know, openly discussed with our community. But look, I would echo the sentiment that Madam Mayor has put in a tremendous amount of effort to, I suppose, harmonise what had been put forward by the administration with her views of what was best for the community. Was there anybody that wanted to speak in favour of, or we will have the summing up by the mover, Councillor Wilding?
No further comments, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry.
Can I have?
Apologies, I didn't see you there, but I will allow you to. Do you wish to say something?
No, that's okay. Just a question. Because the previous motion failed, wouldn't we automatically retain the existing policy?
That had occurred to me, so I would maybe put it to governance as to what the utility of the vote is, save for, I suppose, a record for the community governance.
No, that's fine. It's just a random thought, but anyway, thank you.
I think a valid one. I might just get an answer to that question.
I think for cleanness of the whole process, I think that by when you broke the process up into individually dealing with each item, I think that then means that it's probably best that you have debated this as has occurred, and then it is very clean process here and very clear on your decision making for the community at hand.
Yeah, happy to proceed with that sage advice. So I will put it to the vote. So all those in favour of Councillor Wilding's alternative as seconded by Councillor Carter, all those in favour, Councillors Wilding, Carter, John and Burke, and our Madam Mayor. All of those against, we have Councillor Ames and myself. So that has passed Councillor Councillor Wilding's notice of motion, which concludes that long and debated item. I think we now move to item 13. We'll get come to, so we'll work our way. Motions for which previous notice have been given. I understand there are none. Announcement of notices of motion for the next meeting. I understand there are none. So now we'll turn to urgent business, not confidential.
yeah.
Okay. All right, urgent business. So the request for a consideration of an item of urgent business. So this is in accordance with clause 5.2.1 of the Town of Bassendean Council Meeting Procedures Laws 2020. A member may move a motion to consider an item of urgent business that is not included in the agenda for that meeting. So what this is in relation to is item 15.2 would be the Bassendean Oval Redevelopment Feasibility Study Governance Framework. So I would call for a mover and a seconder to allow us to deal with that. So Councillor Ames, thank you. Councillor Wilding. So we'll move to deal with that urgent business. Now, in terms of that, I'll turn that over to the CEO who can address us on that item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will hand over very quickly to the Director of Community in Place. But before I do, I just wanted to clarify that this is not a late item because we have been tardy. This is a late item because we saw tonight as an opportunity to raise this with you at short notice. If we had to wait for another council meeting, we would have lost a month of feasibility time. And it also allowed us to meet in good faith, as we have promised to meet with Swan Districts, and we gave them this particular item over the weekend. And the Director of Community in Place met with Swan District CEO on Monday to make sure that we were aligned before it came to council. So hence the reason you got the information late was we were doing some due diligence, but I'll now hand over to the Director of Community in Place.
Thank you, and through the Deputy Mayor as well as the CEO. Thank you for your time this evening on this matter. We're basically putting forward a governance structure which is probably fairly straightforward, with a steering committee, project working groups, community groups and stakeholders. And then as part of that steering group or steering committee, we're looking for 2 councillor nominations to participate on that steering committee. There is a note in the report to say that it will be during business hours, and at least at the beginning it will be monthly. It may stretch out to 6 weekly going forward, but certainly in the immediate time frame it will be monthly, so just to be aware of that. The other key element of this report is the project objectives, which have been outlined in the report and also included in the governance framework. And just an overarching comment about those, that we're basically looking for commercial and community outcomes that create a significant landmark and venue that supports sporting activity, community activation, as well as supporting the aspirations of the town's council plan. So over to you if you have any questions.
Councillor Ames. Oh, sorry, Councillor Carter.
Sorry, asking a question about this one. May I ask, does the Mayor wish to sit on this committee? Because I understand under the Act that she can put herself
That was
on.
certainly my understanding, and given that the Mayor had indicated a willingness to be on that committee, I think you're right, Councillor Carter. So I get the Mayor's confirmation, but I think that then leaves the field open for one position. So once we've got the Mayor's confirmation, we'll move on to that final position. Madam Mayor?
Yes, I would love to be on that committee if I could ever leave the house.
Well, such is your right, so that makes that an easy decision. We will, I'll take from the floor, and I do understand that there had been some other indications, so I might take from the floor anybody else who would be interested in that position. Councillor Ames indicating?
I've just also got a question before, I suppose there's any opportunity to fill the second role. I dare say this goes through the chair to the Director of Community in Place. Rightio. I believe this was shared with the CEO of the Swan Districts Football Club, this document recently, yesterday. Is that correct?
Yes, through the Deputy Mayor, that is correct.
Good. And in principle, was there great support? Was there any questioning of the documentation? Any comment that was made, whether constructive or positive from the CEO?
Through the Deputy Mayor, he was very positive and acknowledged its alignment to the Memorandum of Understanding that the town and the Swan District Football Club has already signed. He made a few small amendments, but nothing significant. Very positive about the process and very positive about being involved so early in the process as well.
Are there any further questions? no further questions, I might then ask for nominations for that position. Councillor Ames, I see your nomination. We might just see if there's anybody else. So there was nobody else that had a willingness or inclination to do so? I am seeing in the council chambers that there seems to be a consensus that Councillor Ames will be putting his hand forward, and I take his nomination and Councillor Carter's seconding of his nomination. There being nobody else who has indicated their desire to contest for that role, I can, well, I guess we'll take a vote on that. So all those in favour of Madam Mayor and Talon Ames, Councillor Ames being the, and I.
Before we do, Mr. Chairman, can we just deal?
Okay, so we've had a mover and seconder for filling those roles. So then for the actual item itself, do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor John and Councillor Wilding.
Thank you.
Now, so having resolved, Councillor Wilding?
Deputy Mayor, would it be more efficient to ask Councillor Ames and Councillor Carter if they would instead move the entire motion rather than doing it in two separate votes?
Yes, it certainly has. We had done before. So I guess we can indicate that it's Councillors Ames and Carter who had indicated a willingness to move both the item and the item with those two names inserted, being Madam Mayor and Councillor Ames. So that is the item that's being put and moved by those councillors. Does anybody wish to speak for or against that item? I see no one wanting to speak for or against that item. We'll move to voting on the item. So everybody who is in favour of moving that item with those names inserted, if they can indicate their willingness. So everyone's in, I see everybody is in favour. Madam Mayor is also in favour. That is unanimous. Item 16, confidential business. There is none. That brings us to the closure of the meeting. So, yes, thank you everybody for staying the course and spending 2 hours of their evening with us. That will conclude this meeting, and we advise that the next council briefing session will be held on Tuesday the 18th of June, commencing at 6 p.m, and the ordinary council meeting will be the 25th of June at 6 p.m. Thank you all.